It's not done on a cream press, even though those lines are perfectly straight and those columns are exact. It was all done just by hand. And by some scribe somewhere. This is about 125 years old. And between those green marks, and it starts over here on my left, and then it goes to my right, which is opposite of the way you would write. It's Hebrew, and that has the 10 Commandments. Exodus chapter 20. And that's got the 10 Commandments. This goes to Numbers chapter 3, from Exodus chapter 15 to Numbers chapter 3. Okay? And then I got one here that's a lot older and more valuable. And this one was important to me, and I had to buy it. Have y'all know Brother John Melanson? Okay, well, some of you that's met him, he's been up here, I think, hasn't he? All right, well, Brother John Melanson, I have to watch him with this one, because when it was laid out, I grabbed it first, and he was sitting there wishing that I didn't want it. But it starts with Leviticus chapter 16, and I'm going to talk about that quite a bit this week too. And this one is deer skin. That makes it a little more rare, because they didn't use deer skin unless they just had to. And it's deer skin, and it was being penned about the time George Washington was fighting independence from England. And you're welcome to come up and touch that and look at it. It's not that terribly critical. I got a couple of things up here, and for sake, I know somebody would tell Brother John if I didn't put on gloves. And I need to put me up beside here that do not touch, because some of these pieces are pretty valuable and pretty ancient. This particular lamp right here was made somewhere between 40 BC and 40 AD. And it's a Herodian lamp, an Herod's era. And it's a real lamp. It was found in an excavation. And over to your right, you see that file over right there. And then click Monday night when that opens up. And we'll be ready to go. And then this one right here is a special marking, and every time you see it, you'll know what age it was. All right, that. And this is a visiting period, which would be around 325 AD to around 500. And so that's out of that period. All right? And then right here is a clay pot handle. It's all messy, very badly done. And this one is called a revoltware. And for a long time, when they find this stuff, it's sloppy made, didn't look good, it throw it away. Then one day it dawned on somebody, where are we finding this? And it has something in common. And in AD 66, the Jews had revolted against Rome, and they were on the run. And they made their pottery sloppy because they weren't worried about making it look pretty, because they were in a hurry, because the Romans were after them. And they would make this, and it wasn't very good, and so they were throwing it away to find out there's only a 4-year window that was made, and that makes it a little more unique and a little more rare. And then I have another one right here, and the exact date on that one we don't know, but it came out of the city of Ai. And you know what happened at Ai after the Israelites left Jericho? They went to Ai, and they eventually defeated Ai. But this came out of the ruins at Ai. Exactly what they were doing, I don't know for sure on that. When Brother Melanson was here, did he talk about Bethlehem? I'd like to. He doesn't even have these. I picked them up. He didn't pick any up, and he's not going to get them. These are pieces of pottery that came out of the ruins of Bethlehem. And we know it's Bethlehem. This right here is a stone top. They carved it out of stone, and and the other is just pieces of pottery out of there. Well, this one is questionable, or it is old. The guy sold it to me as old. But then again, in some places, you better know where you're buying it. But they would put their olive oil in it and pour it out of that little spout into these other basins. And that would probably be a little You keep your spices in there, wouldn't it? Maybe salt or anything else in there in that little small pot. They made lots bigger than that. I'm going to talk about some of these other things a little bit later. But I think we are ready to go on our first lesson tonight. And let me get my stuff out up here. In Exodus chapter 25 and verse 8, the Lord told Moses, said, let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. Well, in the very beginning, Adam and Eve, or Adam in particular, would meet with God in the cool of the day. And God and Adam would go for a walk. Well, it wasn't very long when God showed up one day to go for a walk with Adam, and Adam wasn't there. And he got to asking Adam, where are you? Well, Adam was hiding amongst the trees of the garden because in the meantime, he had disobeyed God, sin entered the picture, and fellowship between God and man had been broken. And so, out there in that wilderness, God told Moses, let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell with them. And the tabernacle became a mutual meeting ground where man and God could meet and fellowship restored between God and man. And that was the whole purpose of that tabernacle out in the wilderness, where God and man could meet and be restored to fellowship. All right. The tabernacle was an object lesson to the Israelites. Some of you are teachers or have been teachers, and in the past, you have used material things as an object lesson to teach children, and we still do that. Even adults sometimes will use a material object as an object lesson to try to teach some spiritual truth. And so the tabernacle and the furniture in the tabernacle, the priest, everything about the ceremonial law was an object lesson that taught those Israelites about God. You see, they didn't have a copy of the Bible back then. The only scriptures that had been recorded at the time was those 2 tables of stone that Moses brought down off the mountain. And the Bible had not been recorded. It had not been written. They didn't have a copy of the Bible. So how did they learn about God? Well, they learned about God from the objects lessons that were taught to them in that ceremonial law. Not only the tabernacle or the temple, and by the way, the tabernacle is nothing more than a portable temple. And so if you talk about one, you're talking about the areas were the same, the size was a little different, and the temple was a little bit more elaborate. And just this past week, I don't know if y'all had the same Sunday school lesson that we did out of the quarterly. Just this past week, it talked about David getting the material together to build the temple, for Solomon building the temple. And if you go back there and read the amount of the 1,000 talents of gold, whatever. Anyway, that figured up. You know how much money that was? About 200 billion in gold alone went into Solomon's temple. $200 billion of gold in our monetary value. And the silver was a few billion itself. And so that temple that Solomon built was the most expensive building on the earth, probably 4 times more expensive than the 4 most expensive buildings that's ever been built since. And so anyway, pretty valuable. Anyway, but it was all an object lesson. The sacrifices, the holidays, the priesthood, everything was an object lesson to teach them something about God. All right? The only Bible they had. Now, in the study of the tabernacle, if you wanted to do a study and you went out to the bookstore and you bought books, there's a lot of books on the tabernacle, probably as many as that on any other one subject. And I'm not bringing up this point to be critical of anybody else, but there's some very common mistakes that people make, and you can fall into that trap real easy. Because most will fall into that trap when they try to do a study on the tabernacle. And so I want to bring this out, but I want to really use it as an opportunity to teach you something about it. And the first mistake that's commonly made is trying to make everything mean something. And it probably did, but sometimes the material goes too far. For instance, these nails that are driven in the ground here to hold up this linen cord that held up the fence, And then there were some coverings that went over the top, and they were held on by linen cords. And it had these brass nails that were driven into the ground. One writer makes the statement, he said, those brass nails are driven into the ground, they're half in the ground, they're half out of the ground, and that pictures death and resurrection. Boy, do you have to have a good imagination to come up with that. But most of the books out there really do the same thing. And they try to make every little detail mean something. And it may have, but it's not interpreted in the Bible, and sometimes we can go way too far with it. There'll be some times during our study I'll tell you it's a judgment call on my part. This is what I think it means. But some things, most of it's interpreted, but let's just don't go too far. Because when a guy writes that kind of stuff in the book, there's a great big question mark that goes up in your mind. Does he really know what he's talking about? Where do you get that? Where'd that come from? And then when he's talking about something that's really true, then you wonder, well, does he really know what he's talking about over here? And so there's a credibility thing comes into mind when you try to make things mean something that's just not there. All right? Second mistake is trying to make things that are similar, necessarily symbolical of each other. And that happens a whole lot when all the Bible study. Just because two things are similar does not necessarily mean that they're symbolical of one another. I'm going to come back to that here in just a second, but using this illustration. Two other errors are trying to make the tabernacle symbolize believers in the church. Now, listen, I'm going to borrow y'all a little bit. And I'm going to make this side over here the Old Testament. And this side over here, y'all are going to be the New Testament, okay? And right here in the middle of the pulpit and the back wall back there, there's the cross. There's the cross of Christ. And so y'all are New Testament and y'all are Old Testament. Y'all don't mind being new if they don't mind being old, do you? Okay, we got that fixed, all right? Now what we have here in the Old Testament, in the tabernacle, was a golden menorah called a candlestick. 7-lamp menorah, candlestick, and made out of gold. Over here in the New Testament, in the book of Revelation, we have the 7 golden candlesticks done. And nearly every book, nearly every one of them, come along and say, well, the 7-lamp candlestick in the Old Testament represents the 7 golden candlesticks in the New Testament. Now, they certainly are singular, aren't they? That we cannot deny. But here's the mistake that's being made. The 7-lamp candlestick in the Old Testament represents Jesus as the light of the world. And the 7 golden candlesticks in the book of Revelation, which are the Lord's churches, we represent Jesus Christ as the light of the world. There's the focus on both of them. And so it's a mistake. You're taking away from that when you say this represents this. Well, there is similarity. But you've lost the whole picture when you try to take this to be that, when both of them actually represent Jesus as the light of the world. The message in the Old Testament about Jesus is exactly the same message in the New Testament about Jesus, okay? So they're all going to go toward Jesus. So let's not lose focus on the real purpose by making things that are similar symbolical of each other. And I'm going to come back a little bit to that later. Now look, in the New Testament, church truth was a mystery to the Old Testament saints. We don't have to be troubled. The Bible tells us it was. And even the disciples didn't get it because they thought Jesus is going to restore the kingdom. They didn't understand that we are no longer under the Old Testament law. We're under the New Testament church age. And they didn't get it. They didn't see it. And so the church age was a mystery to the Old Testament saints. So trying to make this represent the church is a mistake, because just suppose some boy goes up to a rabbi and tugs on his garment and says, Mr. Rabbi, well, what does that represent? Oh, son, it represents the church. Boy thinks for a minute, he tugs on the garment again, he says, Mr. Rabbi, what's the church? Son, I don't have a clue, it's a mystery. We don't know what it is. Well, what purpose would there be in any of this if it represented something that was a total mystery not to be understood? You wouldn't stay with it, would you? You'd quit. Why? Why would you do it? We made it different. Because you're not going to understand it anyway. All right. Now, When I began reading all these books on the tabernacle, the more I read, the more I got confused. There's a period of time in there, I just, you get confused too much, trying to assimilate too much. And because one book said this means this, and another book said that means that, and this and that, and then they do with each other. And finally, it just kind of dawned on me. There has to be one central theme of this tabernacle. And the priest and the sacrifices, the entire ceremonial law has to have one main theme. Everything has to fit that theme. It all has to be in perfect harmony. It all has to match. All has to come together like a puzzle, but it all has to match the one central theme. In a nutshell, here's what that theme is about. Inside this room back here, and if you don't remember all of it tonight, stay with me because we'll be going over and over and over every night. In this back room back here is called the Holy of Holies. That's where the Ark of the Covenant was. That symbolized God's throne in heaven. This is where a righteous God dwells. On the outside of the tabernacle, outside this fence out here in the courtyard, is a nation of sorry, no good for nothing human beings. And the central theme of the tabernacle is what has to take place for that old sinner to come inside the courtyard, to the altar, to the laver, to the holy place, into the Holy of Holies, and be restored to fellowship with the holy and righteous God. Now that's what this is all about. The conditions and the terms and all the theology involved in what has to be done for that sinner to be able to come and to approach a holy and just God and to be restored to fellowship with God. So that's the one central thing what it's about. Now, with that being true, here's what we learn. We're going to learn about the sinful depravity of man. And these studies make a good revival because the first thing we do is that we reduce man down to the level he belongs. He's nothing but scum. There's not a good thing we can say about man. Somebody said if you can't say anything good about man, don't say anything at all. Well, we couldn't say anything about man because the Bible says there is none righteous, no, not one. And that we have all sinned and come short of the glory of God. We are sinners. We are corrupt. There is nothing good to say about us. And so that's what we learned in the tabernacle, is how bad mankind is and why he has certain things have to be done before he can fellowship with God. Another thing we're going to learn is the Lord's holiness and righteousness. So what we do in this study, we bring man down and we lift God up. God is a holy and righteous God. And false religion, doesn't matter what name you go by, false religion does the same thing. False religion brings God down to a level God doesn't belong. And false religion brings man up to a level that man doesn't deserve. So that there's a little bit of difference between God and man. If you just, do good works and say your prayers at night and just live good, that everything's okay between you and God. That God's the Father of everybody, and so there's nothing you really have to do. And so that's false religion, because what is really true is that man's way down there and God's way up there, and there is an eternity between ourselves and God. And when we realize how low we are and how great God is, and we realize the grace of God that would come out of heaven and down here to the likes of us and lift us out of the fiery clay and set us upon a rock, then it must be the grace of God that would do a thing like that for me. And so you can't appreciate the grace of God until you understand something of the nature of mankind and how bad we were. And God would come down among the likes of us and save us from our sins. So we learned something about the holiness of God. We're going to learn of the great change that man must make in order to fellowship with God. Listen, I can't make that change. And God has to make that change in me. He makes the change for me. But I have to change. God's not going to stoop to my level. I have to be brought up to His level, and He has to do it. He gets all the credit for it. It's by the grace of God. Listen, folks, a long time ago, I learned I do not ask God to be fair with me. I beg for mercy. I don't want to be fair. I don't want to get what I deserve. And I beg for mercy, because I deserve a lot worse. Used to have a lady that come to me all the time. And Sunday evening, you can count on it before church ever starts. Going to come to my office with a complaint. Complain about something. And just constantly say, I don't know what I've done to deserve this. And one day I called her by name and I said, well, you deserve that and a whole lot more. What you deserve is hell. And she was shocked. I finally had the nerve to say it. You know, isn't that right? Why do we have a right to complain about anything? I deserve an eternity in a burning hell. And anything that I have that's better than that is not anything to complain about, is it? And so I'm grateful to God that I'm saved and that He has forgiven me and I am not going to a burning hell. And so I've got a lot to be thankful for. And even if I have a few hard times in life, what do I have the right to grumble about? Because it's better than what I deserve. So let's just quit complaining and be grateful, okay? We're going to learn how a sinful man could be reconciled and approach a holy and just God. The terms of our reconciliation. We're going to learn the plan of salvation. And look, folks, I'm not going to elaborate a whole lot on it tonight, but I want to tell you, the folk in the Old Testament were saved exactly like they are in the New Testament. Same plan of salvation. Because if the folk in the Old Testament could have been saved by the law and by making sacrifices at the altar, there'd be an altar right up there and a pen of goats out here. And Jesus wouldn't have to die. He died for y'all just like He died for y'all. Jesus tasted death for every man. Same kind of salvation. Because when He came into the world, He promised them He would come and die for their sins. He promised us, not an eyewitness among us. So all we got to take His word for it, right? They took His word that He would. We have taken His word that He did. Same faith and same person, did it? All right. And then we're going to learn about Jesus Christ. His work, His life, His attributes, His character. All of this is about Jesus Christ. I am not preaching to you this week on the tabernacle. I'm preaching to you about Jesus Christ, and I'm just using this as an excuse to do it. Okay? That's what I like about it, because it's all about Jesus Christ. All right. Now, the basic interpretation of the tabernacle is found in Hebrews chapters 8, 9, and 10. If you got your Bible real quick, you want to turn there with me. We'll look at a couple of those verses. Hebrews chapters 8, 9, and 10. And what I want to show you is that the interpretation of all this is not mine. I didn't figure this out. I just read it. All right? I'm just a messenger. If you enjoy this, tell the Lord that I'm just a messenger. All right? In Hebrews chapter 8, in verse 5, it says, who serve unto the example, not about the priest. And that word example is the same word we get copier. Who serve unto the example and shadow of heavenly things, as Moses was admonished of God when he was about to make the tabernacle. For see, saith he, that thou make all things according to the pattern showed to thee in the mount. All right? It's an example, a shadow of heavenly things. In chapter 9 and verse 9, which was a figure for the time then present, in which were offered both gifts and sacrifices that could not make him that did the service perfect as pertaining to the conscience. All right? These things were a figure. Verse 12, neither by the blood of goats and calves, but by His own blood, He entered once into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us. All right? Not by the animals. Verse 24, chapter 9, verse 24. For Christ is not entered into the holy places made with hands, which are the figures of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Just now in verse 10, or chapter 10, verse 1. For the law, having a shadow of good things to come, and not the very image of the things, can never with those sacrifices which they offered year by year, continually make the comers thereunto perfect. Verse 4, for it is not possible that the blood of bulls and goats should take away sin. Okay? Now that pretty well establishes this is about heavenly things, isn't it? This is a type, a copy, a picture, an object lesson about heavenly things. Now look, I'm going to brag just a little bit, okay? I've done this so many times that I can answer any question that you have about the tabernacle or the law. I can answer any question that you can come up with a Bible answer. That's a pretty good brag, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Whatever question, even if I have never heard that question before, I can give you a Bible answer to that question. Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 5. First talking about the Ark of the Covenant. Let me get back over there. He said that over it the cherubims of glory shadowing the mercy seat. Now notice this. of which we cannot now speak particularly. You know what that means? That means you can ask me a question, and I can tell you, I don't have a clue. Hebrews 9:5. Right? And so if the Apostle Paul did not know the particulars of all these details, how do we think we're going to come up with it? Okay? And so sometimes this is my favorite verse, because sometimes people ask me a question about something, and I'll say, well, I don't know, Hebrews 9:5, you know. That pretty well settles that, doesn't it? All right. Have a little fun with that. Matter of fact, you get out here earlier if you laugh at the joke. Okay. Oh, y'all are really trying to get out here quick, aren't you? All right. Now, I want to talk about a little bit. You see how that the tabernacle and the law system represent Jesus, and the Lord's churches represent Jesus. There's the central point of what this is all about. All right. We're gonna look at the camp layout a little bit, because that's really significant as well, how everything in the camp was laid out. And the tabernacle always faced the direction of east. Now I hope you don't go telling Moses that I didn't always put up the model of the direction of east. So this is north, right? I would have had to turn everything around and face it this direction. Now Moses would have had to do that. He'd have to move a mountain if he had to, but he had to put that tabernacle facing the direction of east. Always face the direction of east. When they built the temple, Solomon's temple, the temple faced the direction of east. When that temple was destroyed and they built the next temple, it faced the direction of east. And the gate called Beautiful, that's mentioned in the New Testament, faced the direction of east. The entranceway into the sanctuary always had to face east. And I think that's highly significant. And one of the main reasons, the verse given in the Bible, Matthew 24 and verse 27. For as lightning cometh out of the east, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. And Matthew 25:31. When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory. What direction is he coming from? He's coming from the east. You know, one of these days Jesus is coming back to this earth to rule and reign with his people in Jerusalem, and a new temple that will be built for the millennium. He will come and rule and reign, and he's coming by the direction of the east. Matter of fact, even those Arabs in Jerusalem have read that, and that eastern gate that they built there, the eastern gate that's in the wall, do you know they come along and they have blocked that thing up? They put massive stones in there and sealed that thing up, and then built an Arab cemetery out in front of it, knowing that would keep any good Jew out. They stoned that thing up to keep Jesus out, as if that's going to stop him when he comes back. As a matter of fact, none of them will be there. He's going to level that whole place over there when he comes back and goes to the temple. All right? Now, the 12 tribes of Israel camped around the tabernacle, and each one of the 12 tribes would camp according to the standard bearer. Now, what you got a four-sided object here. You got 3 tribes here, 3 here, 3 there, and 3 over here. One of those tribes was a standard-bearing tribe. A standard meant a banner. Some type of a banner that they held high that indicated their position. And then that tribe and the other 2 tribes would camp on a certain side of the tabernacle. That tabernacle layout was like a military camp. They were so organized it was unreal. How would you like to be in Dallas, Texas, and if you took Dallas, Texas, and all the cities that actually border Dallas, and not Fort Worth, that doesn't, borders don't touch, but Garland and Duncanville and Mesquite and all those cities, and Dallas and those immediate cities make up about 2.5 million people. It's about the same number of Israelites who left the land of Egypt. And how would you like to be in that bunch if they all decided in one day, on carts and wagons and on foot, to move to Oklahoma City? That'd be horrible, wouldn't it? But they left in an exactly structured order, totally military-style order, and so every person had their place. And in that entire 40-year wilderness, the bad thing about it was you had the same neighbors all the time. And so anyway, they would camp around according to the standard bearer. All right? On the east side, that would be here, when the tabernacle was facing east. On this side, this group was first in the move. Then over here on the south side, this group went second in the move. And then the Levites would pack up the tabernacle. They're in the middle. And then on the west side, that group down there, they were the third group of the camp that went. And then on the north side, this group over here, they were last in the march. And the tabernacle was always in the middle of the camp. Even when it was being marched, they were always in the middle of the camp. And all the other tribes were around them. All right? Now, the standard-bearing tribes. The tribe of Judah, and the symbol for Judah was that of a lion. And it's possible that on that banner, they might have had a picture of a lion on their banner to indicate this is the tribe of Judah. Talked about Jesus being a lion from the tribe of Judah. That was the symbol for Judah. But you know the symbol for Reuben was that of a man. And the symbol for Ephraim, and that's interpreted in the Bible there, that the symbol for Ephraim was a calf. And the symbol that was for Dan was believed to be an eagle. That's the only one that, left a little liberty there. But for a long time, tradition has made Dan represent that of an eagle. All right? Now, what's strange about that is that in the book of Ezekiel, in chapter 1, Ezekiel has a vision of heaven. He sees into heaven, and he sees these four creatures around the throne of God. And these are the four strangest creatures you ever saw, because he said that they could go forward in any direction. They go this way, they go forward. They go that way, they go forward. This way's forward. Because they each have four faces. The face of a lion, the face of a man, the face of a calf, and the face of an eagle. On those creatures, read that in Ezekiel chapter 1. Ezekiel chapter 10 tells us that they were cherubim, some part of the angelic host, unique creatures of the host of angels, and they were called cherubim. All right? Then in John's vision of heaven, he gets a glimpse into heaven. He sees four living creatures surrounding the throne of God. They have the face of a lion, the face of a calf, the face of a man, and the face of an eagle. Just the same symbol that surrounded the tabernacle out there in the wilderness. The same symbol was out there that was around those creatures that surrounded the throne of God in heaven. All right? Now the Levites. The tribe of Levi was singled out from the other tribes of Israel, and they camped around the tabernacle. All right? And so the priests and the Levites camped between the 12 tribes and the tabernacle itself. Now here's something else you may not know. That if you took these three tribes over here and the Levites, and the numbers, and in the numbers of the tribes here, here, and here, there's twice as many here as there are there. You know what that would make? A perfect layout of a cross out there in that wilderness. If you get up there in an airplane or a hot air balloon and look there in that camp, it's going to look like a cross, the layout of the camp from the air, the shape of a cross. All right? And so now the Levites were singled out, and the Levites camped between the 12 tribes and the tabernacle. Okay? Now, there was a vacant space between the camp and the tribes. You'll see a lot of pictures. I've got some, and you'll see a lot of pictures. Somebody didn't do their homework, and they'll show tents right up next to this fence. God said, I'll kill you. I'll kill you if you put those tents up there. You stay away. There's got to be a vacant space between the tabernacle and your camp, and so you're going to better get off at a distance. And you know what? I hate to be the guy that's living in the first tent, because I think I might be a yard too close. And so they had to put their tents back. That area around the tabernacle was probably a national assembly area where the elders, the leaders of the people would come out and hear thus saith the Lord, and then take it back into their community and tell them what God had to say. But anyway, there had to be that vacant space between the two. All right, now the tribe of Levi around the tabernacle. Old brother Levi had 3 boys, Kohath, Merah, and Gershon. Each one of these boys became the heads of their family. Okay? And so the family was divided up. Here on the east side, down here, was the priest. They had the overall supervision of the tabernacle. The priest camped here. Not all Levites could be priests. Only if they were the family of Aaron. Come back Wednesday night and we'll talk about that. They had to be of the family of Aaron to be a priest. Okay, so Aaron And Moses and the priest camped over here on the east side. Over on the south side, that'd be over to the left over here, on this side camped the Kohathites. The Kohathites were in charge of even making and maintaining the furniture and the baking. And they were given no equipment to transport these items. Put that one away in your brain to Friday night. All right? Now, on the west side over here, the Gershonites, they were in charge of all the fabric, the coverings, the fence, the hangings. And they were given 2 wagons and 4 oxen to transport those items. That's how they carried it. Now, the furniture had to be carried by hand, but the fabric parts were put on carts. And they had 2 carts and 4 oxen. And then on the north side, the Merarites, they were in charge of the boards and bars, the pillars, the sockets, the bases, all the metal and the wood. And they were given 4 wagons and 8 oxen to transport those items and to carry them around. Of course, they're going to be heavy. All right? Now, the precincts of the tabernacle, I got a little video I'm going to show you here. I think. Does that have sound? I didn't even think about sound. We're going to go ahead and look at it. We'll catch up with the sound tomorrow. Hole on the left front, the first one.
2 cubits. The hangings of one side of the gate shall be 15 cubits, their pillars 3, and their sockets 3. And on the other side shall be hangings 15 cubits, their pillars 3, and their sockets 3. And for the gate of the court shall be an hanging of 20 cubits, of blue, and purple, and scarlet, and fine twined linen, wrought with needlework. And their pillars shall be 4, and their sockets 4. All the pillars round about the court shall be filleted with silver. Their hooks shall be of silver, and their sockets of brass. The length of the court shall be 100 cubits, and the breadth 50 everywhere, and the height 5 cubits of fine twined linen, and their sockets of brass. All the vessels of the tabernacle, and all the service thereof, and all the pins thereof, and all the pins of the court shall be of brass. And thou shalt command the children of Israel that they bring thee pure oil out of beaten for the light, to cause the lamp to burn always. In the tabernacle of the congregation without the veil, which is before the testimony, Aaron and his sons shall order it from evening to morning before the Lord. It shall be a statute forever unto their generations on the behalf of the children of Israel.
You're going to see a lot more interesting animation than that before on the week. All right. There was a cloud to lead them in the day, and a pillar of fire to lead them by night. And you see that picture there? It's kind of a strange looking cloud, isn't it? Different artists do it different ways. I don't know what that cloud looked like. But I do know that somehow that cloud that protected them in the daytime most likely protected them from the rays of the sun and made it a lot cooler to move in the daytime, and that somehow that cloud would come down and descend over the tabernacle. Matter of fact, there were times that it actually came right into the tabernacle, and when it did, they had to get out. And what we sometimes call the Shekinah light, y'all ever heard that? That when the Lord would appear between the cherubim on that Day of Atonement, there'd be a glow if that cloud descended down in there and created that light effect and appeared to Moses. So somehow that cloud would go up. It's time to sound the trumpet, pack everything up, we got to go. And they followed that cloud through the wilderness. God didn't tell them where they're going to go. Didn't tell them where they're going to stop. They just followed that cloud. Now, when they're following the cloud and they're going several consecutive days, they didn't stop at night, put up the tabernacle, take it down the next morning. They left it packed up. When they got to a location and God wanted them to stop, then the cloud would begin to descend somehow and indicate where the Holy of Holies would be positioned. and then they would lay out the tabernacle by the direction of east, and they knew where the Holy of Holies would be and laid everything out around that. And so that's how God directed them while they were out in the wilderness moving about. Okay? There are three main areas to the tabernacle. There is outside here at the courtyard. This area right here, that's just inside the fence right here, is the courtyard. And then in this first room is called the holy place, and only the priest could enter the holy place. Anybody could enter the courtyard provided they had a sacrifice. You couldn't just go in there and look around and see what's going on. You had to have a sacrifice. But when you come inside the first room, the holy place, only the priest could come in the holy place. Average individual could not go into that holy place. Only the priest could go in the holy place. Then, on the annual Day of Atonement, this room here in the back, right back here, this is the Holy of Holies. Only the high priest could enter the Holy of Holies on that annual Day of Atonement. Somebody's going to ask me a question. You're going to be thinking about, well, what about when they move? Well, when the cloud goes up, God's not there. The Levites could come in and pack up the furniture and pick it up and carry it out, and then the rest of them could disassemble the tabernacle. But when they got it all put back together and the cloud come down, better not go in there. And so as long as that cloud was there, you had to, only the high priest could go inside the tabernacle on that annual Day of Atonement. Okay? Now, moving right along. Here's the size of it. The fence right here in the courtyard is 150 feet long, so it wasn't real big. That's a half the length of a football field, that's all. It's 75 feet wide. The fence is not marked here, but it was 7.5 feet high. Now the tabernacle building, that's really marked to be moved, from this end to that end was a grand total of 48 feet even. And it was 18 feet from the outside to the outside right here. And it was 15 feet high. The building right here, 15 feet high. This is 7.5 feet high, half as high as the building. The courtyard gate that allowed you to come inside the tabernacle was 30 feet wide, and it also is 7.5 feet high. Okay? And we're going by 1 cubic equaling 18 inches, and that would vary from project to project. It's just a whole lot easier to figure out from 18 inches to make 1 cubic, or 17 3/4 inches to 1 cubic, don't you think? So we took a little bit of liberty there, made it even the amount. All right, here's the courtyard fence that went around the tabernacle. And the fence pillars, the posts were probably made out of wood. And right over here is an actual piece of the wood called acacia wood, modern term, sheet of wood in the Bible. This is an actual piece of wood. Now, we say the posts were probably made out of wood because it doesn't say. But there were other pillars, and they were made out of wood, so we're going to make the fence post out of wood too. Okay? And this is an actual piece of wood, came off of that tree right there out in the south of Jerusalem, down in the desert, where they get about 1/2 inch of rain per year. How that grow out there is beyond me. All right? The bases to these fence posts or pillars were made of brass. So they had brass bases down at the bottom, and all the caps and the hooks were made of silver. So everything at the top of the fence was made out of silver. Everything at the bottom was made out of brass. And the fence itself was made out of what was called and described in the Bible as fine twine linen. Now here on the table, you can come and pick this up. Just don't handle the artifact, okay? Right here is a piece of flax plant. This is just fiber out of the flax plant. This little bitty tiny fiber that's in that plant. Now when the flax plant is a tall reed plant, about the size of a drinking straw or a pencil, and it could grow 8-10 feet, even taller, and then cut it, and then they split it lengthwise, open it up, and they get this fiber out of it. And the fiber, and linen is very expensive. Here on the table, this is real linen. Come up and look at it. You can buy linen now, and it comes from some of these third world countries where labor is about $4 a day, and they're making real genuine flax plant linen, and the fabric that's on this table right here cost me $200 in Thailand, and they work for about $3 a day making. and it was still $200. Labor intensive. Linen is very expensive, far more expensive than buying silk. And you can find it now in the stores, but 26 years ago when I looked for it, you couldn't. Anyway, this fiber had a husk on it. And so they would take it out of the shell and then soak it in water, let it dry, soak it in water, let it dry. They did it several times until the husk became brittle. And they sat there and they'd do like this, breaking it, and breaking that husk, and made a pile of dirt, dirty work, and they're sitting there getting that husk off of it. Then they run it through combs and comb out that husk. Now, this stuff, I have a handkerchief right here. A lady gave me the first time I ever saw a real linen. And she gave it to me there in Greenville and gave me the catalog that she used to buy that hanky out of. And the catalog was dated December 1945, and it was made in Italy. Well, wages are a little higher in Italy than the third world countries. And in 1945, December, a yard of linen was $300. Okay? Very high price. I'm glad the price came down, or I wouldn't have that. I'd have cotton up there. But anyway, that just common linen was very, very expensive. Now, the fine twine linen, oh, you're going to get in the light, and you're going to get your bifocals just right, and you're going to sit there and pick through till you find that perfectly white fiber. And you pull that white fiber out, and you lay it aside. And you look for another white fiber. And you find all of them here, you lay it aside and get you another pile. Now, if this stuff is $300 a yard, what's that stuff cost? $1,000 a yard stuff, isn't it? Fabric. Fine twine linen, bright white linen fabric, the most expensive fabric on the face of the earth. And that's what they used to build that fence out of. 150 feet long, 75 feet wide, out of fabric that cost $1,000 a yard. And that's what they used in the tabernacle, throughout all parts of the tabernacle, with some exceptions. And if you come Wednesday night, you'll find out what those exceptions are. But anyway, that's what fine twine linen was, all right? And the color of the fence is white because it was that white linen. The fence is 150 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 7.5 feet high. So you didn't just walk up there and look over, put your arms on the fence and look over and see what was going on in the sanctuary, because it's 7.5 feet high, too tall to look into. When they made that fence out of that fine white linen, that white linen represents in the Bible the righteousness of Christ. And one good illustration in Revelation chapter 19, verse 7, talking about the bride. It says, "And to her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for the fine linen is the righteousness of the saints." Now, where do we get our righteousness? It's the imputed righteousness of Christ. That white linen fence is going to represent something of the righteousness of Jesus Christ. Now, here's the verdict out of the Bible about Jesus Christ. Luke 23 and verse 4, it says, Pilate said, "I find no fault in this man." Pilate's wife made the statement, "Have thou nothing to do with that just man?" Judas Iscariot said, "That I have sinned, in that I betrayed innocent blood." The thief on the cross said, "This man has done nothing amiss." The centurion said, "Certainly this was a righteous man." Peter, who knew the Lord about as well as anybody, said that he knew no sin, neither was guile found in his mouth. The Heavenly Father said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." The Apostle Paul said that he was holy, harmless, undefiled, and separate from sinners. And Jesus challenged the Jews, "Which of you convinces me of sin?" Jesus was the only perfect human being that's ever walked on this earth. He never had to apologize to God or man at any time in his life. He was sinless. He had no sin. He could not have sin and still be our Savior. He had to be totally sinless, perfect, and pure from the moment of his birth to the second of his death in order to redeem us from our sins. And so that white linen represents something of the holiness and the righteousness of Jesus Christ. Now, why in the world do you build a fence? You build a fence for two reasons. To keep some things out and to keep some things in, wouldn't you? Well, now, can you just imagine out there in that wilderness? They've been working on this tabernacle all these 7 months, and they were about to get it finished, and here's some Jewish guy up on the side of the hill tending to his goats, and somebody comes by and says, "God is in the tabernacle. The tabernacle is built. God's in the tabernacle." He wants to go see God, so he comes running down that hill, and he runs around this tent, around that tent, run out there, and that open comes to screeching halt because now there's a great big fence, 7.5 feet high, 150 feet long, and 75 feet wide. It says, do not enter. Stay out. You see, when God gave them the instruction for building that fence, God told them, said, that if you try crawling under, or you try crawling over, or you try going around it, I'll kill you. Do or die, I'll kill you. You're not welcome here. Stay out. And that great big white linen fence around that tabernacle was like a big billboard sign with neon letters that says, keep out, do not enter. Now doesn't that seem to contradict the whole purpose when God said, let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell with them, and then comes along and puts up a great big fence that says, keep out, do not enter? You see, that white linen fence represents the righteousness of Jesus Christ, the perfect standard of righteousness. That's what we have to be if we're going to fellowship with God. But that fence bars us from coming into God's presence because God is righteous and we're not. That's the barrier between ourselves and God, the righteousness of God and our sinfulness. And we can't enter into the presence of God and fellowship with Him because we're no good for nothing sinners. We're corrupt. We're unclean. We're dirty. We can't come and fellowship with God. We can't fellowship with the holy and just God. We don't even want to in our sin nature. And so we're barred from the presence of God. And so that fence is doom and gloom to mankind. It shuts us out. It forbids us from coming into the presence of God and having fellowship with God. But wait a minute. Wait a minute. There was one way. The gate. Anybody could enter the gate provided they had a sacrifice. A sacrifice acceptable to God. We have sinned against God. He has the right to set the terms of our reconciliation. There were acceptable sacrifices, and then there were sacrifices that God would reject. It has to be an acceptable sacrifice. And the only sacrifice acceptable to you and I is His Son. So it's one way and one way only. You know, some of these folk out there say, we're narrow. The news media say, well, you folk think that Jesus Christ is the only way to God. That He's the only way to heaven. And y'all are narrow. Well, for crying out loud, who else was lived a perfect sinless life, came into the world and died for our sins, and raised Himself from the dead and ascended to the right hand of the Father, that's capable of saving us from our sins? Nobody's capable. And so if we go with Jesus, we can come in. And we can approach God. And I cannot go on my own merit, but I go with His. And if He goes with me, I can go into the presence of God and be restored to fellowship with God. Take it or leave it, do or die, one way only. No plan A, plan B, plan C. It's one way only. It's Jesus Christ or do or die. It's heaven or hell. It's Jesus Christ and Him only. And if you'll take Him as your sacrifice, you can enter into the presence of God and fellowship with Him. If you come back to tomorrow night, we'll get to the good stuff. And tomorrow night, we're going to finish up on the construction of the tabernacle. And we're going to rend that veil. How to make the hair stand up on your back. The rending of that veil when Christ died. Then on Wednesday night, we're going to go to the priest. And some of you visiting may have your own home church. If you can't talk them into coming out here, we're going to talk about that priest. And the garments that the priest wears. You may have to unlearn something on that lesson. And then on Thursday night, Friday night, we're going to take up with the furniture. On Thursday night, you're going to be on shouting ground. And Friday night, you just might do it. Okay? Because it's going to get better. It's going to build and build and build. And if you'll come back, we'll get to the good stuff. I'm going to turn it over to the pastor now. Close the service.
Man, it's already shouting ground. Amen. Amen. I'm ready for tomorrow night already. You want to stop now, brother? I don't know. I'm ready to keep going. You want to do tomorrow night tonight? Let's stand at our feet and let's dismiss here with a word of prayer. Thank you all for coming. And like invite somebody with you, bring somebody with you tomorrow night.